So these datasets may have looked familiar to you, but welcome to the first challenge of the advanced month. So we've got the transaction detail and the transaction path and the account information table from week 7. And we're doing similar things that we did before, so we're filtering out the cancelled transactions from the transaction detail. We're renaming those fields account from and account to so that we get rid of those underscores and replace them with spaces. Then we're bringing these two data sets together. So those 92 records that we're missing are just those cancelled transactions, which is okay. We don't want to include those on our statements for our customers. Okay, now at this point is where it starts to get a little bit different. So we've split our workflow into two strands. So we've got our outgoing transactions. So we're only looking at the account from. We've got rid of the account to field, and we've made sure to multiply these values by -1 so that they're all negative, because these values are going to be leaving these customers' accounts. And then we have our incoming transactions. So these are the values which are arriving into these accounts. Yep. And then we're going to union them together with the current balance. So that's from our account information. We've just kept the account number, the balance date, and the balance. So all of these start on the 31st of January. So that is the balance as of the 31st of January. And then we want to be able to see how the balance changes throughout the data set. So we union those all together. So we match up the account number to the account from and the account to. We match up the balance date to the transaction date, and we match up the balance to the value. Okay, and then we just do a little bit of renaming here so that we call that balance field the transaction value instead, just so that we stay clear about what we're talking about. And then I'm just going to change this account number to detail view so that I can look at one particular account. So for example, for this account, we see that on the 31st of January, their balance was about £728. Then on the 2nd of February, they made a transaction where they paid another account about £1,000, and then so on and so forth throughout the month. What we want to do is we want to be able to bring this value here, this 228, onto the next line so that we're able to actually add the previous balance to that transaction value so we can find out what the new balance is. And then again, we want to carry that information onto the third line of data, and so on and so forth. So in order to do that, we're going to order our transactions. So I've used a ranking field here. So on my balance date, I went and applied a rank, and let's just take a look at that. So I'm grouping it by each account number because we want this to be separate for each account. This transaction order. I'm doing the balance date in ascending order, so from earliest to latest. And then I've also got the balance there to break ties for when we have two or more transactions happening on the same day. Then we're also including the balance there, so we have a unique number for every single row. Okay? So for example, for this first account here, we've got the transaction order being 1 to 9. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to join this data set back to itself, and I'm going to make sure that each row gets a row for the previous rows added onto it. Okay, so that's a lot of words. What does that mean? So that means that, for example, for this first row, we're actually not going to get any additional rows. But for the second row, we want both of these balances to be associated with number 2. So that we can sum those up together. And so we're basically going to have the number of rows for each of these transaction orders. We're going to have that many rows associated with it. So once we get up to 9, we will have 9 rows associated with transaction order number 9. Okay, so stay with me. Let's see how that works in practice. So we just create a clean step, which is just removing the balance date, nothing more. And then we do a join step where we join that back to itself, and we have our account number equaling to our account number. So this is going to happen for each account. And then we want the transaction order to be greater than the transaction order here. So again, what do I mean? I always get this. I always have to do a little bit of trial and error. I will be honest with you as to which way round I need this greater than or equal to sign to go. Do I need to go greater than or equal to for the data set on the left, or greater than or equal to the data set on the right? So I'll be honest, I do play around with this a bit usually. But basically what we're saying is we want this side to be the upper bound. So for example, that transaction order 9, we want that to be the upper bound for this transaction order on the right hand side. Okay, so what that looks like, if I go to this clean set to have a look at what this has done to my data and find my account number, that same account number that we had before, there it is, then we can see that, for example, let's find my transaction order field here as well. Let me just expand that into detail. There we go. So I've still only got one row for my first transaction, so for that initial balance. But once I get to my second transaction order, then I can see that now in this transaction value -1, I've actually got the balance of the previous row associated and also that transaction value. So if I were to add those two together, I would get the new balance. And it's exactly the same if I looked at the third. I'd have 3 rows associated with it, so I can just sum these values together to find out at each stage what the transaction value is actually being equal to. Okay, so all I need to do then is summarize this. So I need to group by my transaction order, group by my account number, group by my balance date. I'm going to also group by the transaction value, and then it's the transaction value -1 that I take as the values that I sum. And if we take a look at what we're looking at now, so again, I just go to my trusty first account number, then you can see that, for example, for that first row, we've got our balance still being £728. But then when I find my second row, which is down here at the bottom confusingly, then I can see that this 728 minus 1,000 is about minus £369. Okay, so I can see what happens with the transaction value on that day and how it affects the balance. Okay, so some things that I did was I created this balance field, which is just rounding that transaction value -1 to 2 decimal places. I've removed that unnecessary field with all those lots of decimal places, and then I've changed the transaction value field. If that transaction order is 1, then make that a null, else keep it the same. So therefore I'm not actually doing any transactions on the 31st of January, I just have the balance there. And then just getting rid of that ordering so that I have my final statement to send to my customer. So I hope you enjoyed that first advanced challenge, and thank you very much for watching.